The acrid smell of burning circuitry filled Vexra's lungs as her escape pod hurtled toward the blue-green planet below. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, bathing her silvery skin in alternating patterns of red and orange. Her six-fingered hands danced frantically across the interface, trying to regain control of the rapidly descending craft. Stabilizers offline. Navigation compromised. Impact imminent, the ship's AI announced with infuriating calm. Override. Emergency protocols. Vexra shouted, her normally melodic voice cracking with desperation. The diplomatic mission had been a trap, that much was now clear. Ambassador Vexra Lewinthal of the Celestial Concord had been marked for elimination by her own people. The pod shuddered violently as it breached Earth's atmosphere, the heat shield straining against forces it wasn't designed to withstand. Vexra's four iridescent eyes widened as the craft's structural integrity warnings reached critical levels. Trajectory analysis, uninhabited area. Minimal indigenous life forms detected, the AI reported. Small comfort, Vexra thought bitterly. She secured the diplomatic data crystal containing evidence of the conspiracy against her into the hidden compartment of her ceremonial collar. If she didn't survive, perhaps someone would find it. The truth had to be known. The ground rushed up to meet her. Vexra barely had time to activate the emergency restraint system before impact. The world exploded in noise and pain, then darkness. Marcus Reynolds wiped sweat from his brow as he picked through the sprawling junkyard. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly, but he needed to find a suitable transmission for Mrs. Hernandez's ancient pickup truck. As the only mechanic in Hollow Creek willing to work with salvaged parts, his reputation depended on finds like these. "Should be around here somewhere," he muttered, consulting the inventory list on his tablet. Owen, the junkyard owner, kept meticulous records, but his organizational system was questionable at best. A glint of metal caught Marcus's eye, something reflecting sunlight at an odd angle behind a stack of crushed cars. Curious, he changed direction, squeezing through a narrow passage between towering piles of scrap metal. What he found stopped him cold. A crater, 20 feet across, smoking slightly in the afternoon heat. In the center lay what could only be described as a spacecraft, sleek, alien, and definitely not from any aerospace program Marcus had ever seen. The hull was cracked open like an egg, revealing glimpses of technology that defied understanding. "Holy shit," he breathed, instinctively backing away. Then he saw her. Half ejected from the craft, a figure lay motionless on the scorched earth. Female in form, but unmistakably not human. Her skin had a metallic sheen, shifting between silver and pale blue in the sunlight. Foreclosed eyes dominated an elegant, angular face framed by what looked like crystalline filaments instead of hair. She wore what appeared to be a formal uniform or armor of some kind, torn and damaged from the crash. Marcus's first instinct was to run, to call someone, the police, the military, anyone. But something stopped him. Blood, or something like it, violet and iridescent, pooled beneath her lower body, which was partially crushed under a section of the ship's hull. She was injured. Dying, perhaps. As if sensing his presence, her eyes fluttered open, all four of them, revealing pupils like liquid mercury. She flinched when she saw him, a sound like chimes escaping her throat. "Please," she said, the word heavily accented but unmistakably English. "Help me." Marcus looked over his shoulder. The junkyard was deserted for miles, the town far enough away that no one would have noticed the crash. This was his decision alone. "Can you move?" he asked, approaching cautiously. Her expression shifted, something like despair crossing her alien features. "No. Lower body, damaged. Cannot feel." Marcus's medical knowledge was limited to basic first aid, but he recognized the implication. Spinal injury. Paralysis. Out of his depth didn't begin to cover this situation. "I'm Marcus," he said, making a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. "I'm going to try to help you. What's your name?" "Vexra," she replied, a shudder running through her upper body. "Betrayed. Hunted. Not safe for you." "Yeah, well, leaving someone to die isn't really my style," Marcus said, already pulling out his phone. "I know someone who can help. A doctor. Discreet." He thought of Eleanor, who'd patched him up more than once without asking questions. "But first, let's get you out from under that wreckage." As he approached her, Vexra's eyes locked onto his, confusion and vulnerability warring with suspicion. "Why help? I am not your kind." Marcus began examining the metal pinning her without touching her directly. "Maybe that's exactly why," he said quietly. "Right now, you're the one who needs help, and I'm the one who can give it. Seems simple enough to me." For the first time, something like hope flickered across Vexra's alien features as Marcus began to work. "You brought an alien to my garage?" Dr. Eleanor Reyes hissed, staring at the unconscious figure laid out on Marcus's workbench. "Clinic would have asked questions," Marcus replied, adjusting the makeshift splint he'd fashioned to stabilize Vexra's spine during transport. He'd covered her with a tarp in his truck bed, heart pounding at every stoplight between the junkyard and his garage. "Besides, this place has better equipment for whatever we might need to do." Eleanor ran a hand through her short gray hair, medical bag clutched tightly in her other hand. At 56, she'd seen plenty in her career, from her time as a combat medic to her current role as the town's most discreet physician. But this was unprecedented. "I took an oath to do no harm," she muttered, approaching Vexra cautiously. "I suppose that extends to non-human patients too." As Eleanor began her examination, Vexra's eyes fluttered open. All four immediately focused on the doctor, who flinched but didn't step back. "Another human," Vexra observed, her melodic voice strained with pain. "Are you going to dissect me now?" Marcus stiffened, but Eleanor simply pulled on her examination gloves. "Only if your attitude doesn't improve," she replied dryly. "I'm Dr. Eleanor. I'm here to help, if you'll let me." Vexra's eyes narrowed, then shifted to Marcus. "You brought a healer." "Thank you. Can you tell me where the pain is worst?" Eleanor asked, professional mode engaged despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Lower spine. Cannot move legs." Vexra's voice remained steady, but a slight tremor ran through her upper body. "Neural pathways severed, I believe." Eleanor nodded, reaching into her bag. "I'm going to need to touch you to examine the injury. Is that acceptable?" Vexra gave a gesture that seemed equivalent to a nod. As Eleanor worked, occasionally consulting with Marcus for assistance, Vexra explained her situation in terse sentences between waves of pain. "I was diplomatic envoy from the Celestial Concord. Sent to negotiate resource treaty with neighboring system. Discovered evidence of corruption. Ship sabotaged. Escape pod programmed to crash. Someone tried to kill you to cover up this corruption?" Marcus asked, handing Eleanor a portable scanner she'd repurposed from an ultrasound machine. "Yes. High Council members involved. Did not expect I would survive." A sound like crystalline wind chimes emanated from Vexra, a laugh, though without humor. "Did not expect humans either." Eleanor's scanner emitted a soft beep. She frowned at the readings. "Your physiology is different, obviously. But I can see the damage. Your equivalent of a spinal cord is severed. On a human, this would mean permanent paralysis." "And for me?" Vexra asked. "I don't know," Eleanor admitted. "But I can treat the other injuries, stop the bleeding. Give you a fighting chance while we figure this out." As Eleanor worked through the night, Marcus set up a makeshift living space behind his garage, a cot, privacy screens, and an old TV. By dawn, Vexra was stabilized, her silver-blue skin regaining some of its luster, though she remained unable to move below mid-torso. "They will come for me," Vexra said as Marcus brought her water. "The assassination attempt failed. My enemies will send others. How would they even find you?" Marcus asked, watching as she examined the water curiously before drinking. Vexra touched her ceremonial collar, revealing a small crystal. "This contains evidence of their crimes. It also emits a signature they can track. Cannot remove it, biologically linked." Eleanor, washing blood, violet and iridescent, from her hands, exchanged glances with Marcus. "So you're saying we're harboring not just an alien, but a fugitive alien being hunted by other aliens?" "I can leave," Vexra offered, attempting to push herself up with her arms before falling back weakly. "You have done enough." Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No. We started this, we'll see it through." "You don't even know me," Vexra said, confusion evident in all four eyes. "I know you need help," Marcus replied simply. "And I know enough about being hunted to recognize someone who deserves better than what they got." Eleanor sighed heavily, drying her hands. "Well, if we're doing this, we need a better plan than hiding you in a garage. And we need to figure out if there's any way to help you walk again." Vexra's gaze moved between the two humans, something like wonder crossing her alien features. "On my world, such aid to an outsider would be unusual." "Yeah, well," Marcus said with a half-smile, "humans are full of surprises." As the sun rose fully, illuminating dust motes dancing in the beams of light that filtered through the garage windows, an unlikely alliance formed, built on necessity, sustained by compassion, and shadowed by the threat of what might soon come looking for them. 3 days had passed since Vexra's crash landing. The garage had become a strange hybrid of medical ward, alien shelter, and increasingly, a workshop of innovation. Marcus wiped grease from his hands as he studied the sketches spread across his workbench. "It's like nothing I've ever engineered before," he muttered, glancing over at Vexra, who was examining the inner workings of an old radio Marcus had given her to dissect. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she delicately manipulated the components with her 6-fingered hands. "Your technology is primitive, but the principles are sound," she observed. "This exoskeleton design could work, with modifications." Marcus had spent every free moment designing a mobility aid for Vexra. The concept was part mechanical exoskeleton, part neurological interface, far beyond his skills alone. "We need Damon for this," he said finally. "He's got the electrical engineering background we're missing." Eleanor, changing Vexra's bandages, frowned. "Another person means another security risk. Damon Rivers keeps to himself, works from home designing custom electronics," Marcus explained. "And he owes me after I kept his vintage motorcycle running all these years. Can he be trusted?" Vexra asked, her melodic voice serious. She'd grown stronger but remained unable to move her lower body. The vulnerability clearly frustrated her. Before Marcus could respond, a static-filled voice came from the police scanner in the corner. "All units, we have reports of unusual activity at Reynolds Salvage. Possible meteorite impact, investigating." The 3 exchanged alarmed glances. "They found the crash site," Marcus said, moving quickly to the windows. "We need to move you." "No," Vexra said firmly. "Motion will amplify the tracking signal in my collar. Better I remain still." Her silver-blue fingers touched the crystal embedded in her ceremonial collar. "Besides, your authorities are the least of our concerns." "What do you mean?" Eleanor asked, securing the final bandage. "The signal has been active for 3 days. If my enemies are monitoring, they will have dispatched hunters already." Vexra's 4 eyes looked between her human allies. "I am sorry to have brought this danger to you." Marcus made a decision. "I'm calling Damon." We need that exoskeleton operational yesterday. Damon Rivers arrived an hour later, a tall, lanky man with dark skin and nervous eyes behind thick glasses. He froze in the doorway when he saw Vexra. Holy! He breathed. Yeah, she's an alien, Marcus said, pulling him inside and locking the door. She's also paralyzed and being hunted by other aliens who want her dead. We need your help. To his credit, Damon adjusted quickly. What kind of help? By nightfall, the garage had transformed into a makeshift laboratory. Damon, after his initial shock, had thrown himself into the project with unexpected enthusiasm. His expertise in neural interfaces complemented Marcus's mechanical skills perfectly. If we can synchronize these circuits with her neural pathways, Damon explained, soldering a delicate connection, the exoskeleton should respond to her neural impulses, bypassing the damaged spinal section. Outside, a black SUV drove slowly past the garage. Eleanor, keeping watch at the window, tensed. Government, she whispered. They're canvassing the neighborhood. Let them, Marcus said, not looking up from his work. They won't find anything here. Vexra, watching the humans work tirelessly on her behalf, felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring. On her world, such selfless assistance would be suspicious at best, treasonous at worst. The diplomatic corps had taught her to expect political calculation behind every action. Yet these humans asked for nothing in return. Why risk yourselves for me? She asked suddenly. The three humans paused their work, exchanging glances. Because it's right, Eleanor said simply. Because you're a person who needs help, added Damon, surprisingly firm. Because sometimes the universe gives you a chance to make a difference, Marcus finished, his eyes meeting Vexra's. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended their biological differences. The moment was shattered by a high-pitched tone emanating from Vexra's collar. Her four eyes widened in alarm. They're here, she whispered. The hunters have reached your atmosphere. Damon looked terrified, but continued working faster. How much time do we have? Hours, perhaps, Vexra replied. They will triangulate the signal. Marcus made a split-second decision. Then we finish this tonight. Damon, focus on the neural interface. Eleanor, we need a pain management plan for when we connect this thing. I'll complete the mechanical components. As they worked through the night, the sky above the small town darkened with more than just nightfall. Clouds gathered unnaturally, swirling in patterns that defied meteorological explanation. In her makeshift bed, Vexra watched the humans' determined efforts with growing wonder. They were racing against time, against forces they barely understood, risking everything for someone not of their world. As dawn approached, bringing with it unknown dangers, Vexra made a silent vow: whatever happened next, she would find a way to protect these humans who had shown her the meaning of true alliance, and perhaps, something more. It's ready, Damon announced, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The exoskeleton lay on the workbench, a marvel of improvised engineering. The frame was crafted from lightweight automotive alloys Marcus had salvaged, while the neural interface comprised modified circuit boards from Damon's personal projects. Wires and servos intertwined in a complex lattice designed to support and move Vexra's lower body. Outside, the unnatural storm had intensified. Lightning flashed in impossible patterns, and the air felt charged with an energy that made the human skin prickle. They're searching, Vexra explained, her silver-blue skin reflecting the eerie light filtering through the blinds. The atmospheric disturbance is a byproduct of their scanning technology. Eleanor prepared a series of injections. These are localized anesthetics. The neural connection process will be painful, even with medication. Vexra nodded, all four of her mercury eyes reflecting resolve. Pain is temporary. Freedom is worth it. Marcus knelt beside her. You understand this is experimental, right? We're connecting alien technology to a human-designed interface to your non-human nervous system. I trust you, Vexra replied simply, placing one six-fingered hand over his. The gesture, so human yet not, made Marcus's breath catch. The procedure took nearly 2 hours. Vexra remained conscious throughout, her only signs of distress being a crystalline humming sound that seemed to emanate from her throat and the occasional tremor that ran through her upper body. Damon monitored the neural interface, making minute adjustments as the connection stabilized. Eleanor managed Vexra's pain with careful precision, while Marcus ensured the mechanical components responded correctly. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. Try to activate the movement protocols, Damon instructed, hovering nervously over his diagnostic tablet. Vexra closed all 4 eyes, concentrating. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, with a soft whir, the exoskeleton servos engaged. Her right leg moved, just a slight bend at the knee, but deliberate. The humans held their breath. Her left leg followed suit. Then, with careful precision, both legs swung over the edge of the table. It works, Vexra whispered, opening her eyes. Tears, iridescent like liquid mercury, gathered at the corners. You've given me back movement. Marcus helped her stand, supporting her as the exoskeleton adjusted to her weight distribution. Her first steps were wobbly, the servos whirring with each movement, but she was walking. You are remarkable, she said, looking at each of them in turn. My world would never believe. The garage door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and metal. Through the smoke stepped 2 figures that were unmistakably not human. Tall and lithe like Vexra, but with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes that glowed red in the half-light. They wore form-fitting armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Ambassador Vexra Lewintal, the first hunter announced in a voice like grinding metal, you are charged with treason against the Celestial Concord. Surrender the data crystal. Eleanor and Damon backed away instinctively. Marcus stepped in front of Vexra, but she gently moved him aside with surprising strength. Executioners of the Shadow Council, she replied, her voice steady despite the exoskeleton's slight trembling beneath her. I expected more subtlety. The second hunter surveyed the humans with disdain. These primitives cannot save you. Their deaths will be quick if you surrender now. Vexra's expression hardened. And if I don't? The hunters raised their weapons simultaneously. Then they suffer before they die. What happened next occurred so quickly the humans barely processed it. Vexra lunged forward with unexpected agility, the exoskeleton responding to her neural commands with perfect precision. She twisted between the energy blasts from the hunters' weapons, using the garage's tools and equipment as improvised shields. Marcus! The crystal, she shouted, ducking behind a workbench. Understanding flashed through Marcus's mind. He grabbed a heavy wrench and threw it at the power junction box in the corner. The resulting electrical surge sent arcs of blue lightning dancing through the garage. The hunter's armor, designed to absorb energy, began to glow dangerously. Vexra seized the moment of distraction. Her hands moved to her collar, extracting the data crystal with a swift, painful motion that left silver-blue blood trickling down her neck. She slammed it into an exposed port in her exoskeleton. This was never about me, she announced, standing tall despite the chaos. This was about truth. The exoskeleton suddenly pulsed with energy, projecting a holographic display that filled the garage. Images flashed by, documents, recordings, evidence of the conspiracy that had led to her attempted assassination. But more than that, plans for an invasion, for subjugation of worlds, including Earth. The Celestial Concord's leadership has been compromised, Vexra declared. They plan to eliminate me because I discovered their true agenda. They fear exposure more than anything. The hunters hesitated, their weapons lowering slightly as they absorbed the projected evidence. You were never authorized to access these files, the first hunter said, but with less certainty. I was authorized to negotiate peace, Vexra countered. How could I do that while my own leaders plotted war? She gestured to the humans beside her. These beings, whom you call primitive, rebuilt me when I was broken. They risked themselves for someone not of their world. Tell me, executioners, what does that say about who is truly primitive? A moment of tension stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, the second hunter lowered his weapon completely. The evidence is compelling, he admitted. The High Council will need to see this. The first hunter's red eyes narrowed. Our orders were given by the very individuals implicated in these files, his companion interrupted. Our duty is to the Concord, not to corrupt officials. As the standoff continued, Vexra stood proudly, supported by both her new exoskeleton and the humans who had made it possible. For the first time since crash landing on Earth, she felt not just mobile, but powerful, ready to face whatever came next, whether it be further conflict or the beginning of understanding between worlds. Dawn broke over the small town, sunlight filtering through the ruined garage door. Inside, an uneasy truce had formed. The hunters, introduced as Krell and Tavik, sat rigidly across from the humans while Vexra paced between them, the exoskeleton whirring softly with each step. The Concord must be notified, Krell insisted, his copper skin catching the morning light. If what your evidence shows is true, the Shadow Council's plans threaten more than just Earth. And how do we know you won't simply eliminate us all and take the crystal? Eleanor asked, arms crossed defensively. Tavik, the hunter who had first lowered his weapon, touched a symbol on his armor. It flashed and dimmed. I have deactivated my mission parameters. An executioner cannot do this falsely, it is biologically encoded. Marcus looked to Vexra for confirmation. She nodded slightly. He speaks truth. The question now is what comes next. Vexra's 4 eyes studied each person in turn. I must bring this evidence before the full Concord Assembly. Only they can authorize intervention against the Shadow Council. You're leaving, then, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral despite the sudden tightness in his chest. Vexra moved to the garage's small window, looking out at the Earth sunrise. That was always the logical conclusion, she replied. Yet I find myself reluctant. Outside, black SUVs pulled up at the end of the street. Men in dark suits emerged, speaking into communication devices. Your government has found us, Krell observed. Our ships can extract us before they arrive. Damon nervously adjusted his glasses. And what happens when you return to your world? Will they believe you? Vexra turned from the window, her exoskeleton gleaming in the sunlight. The evidence speaks for itself. But implementation of justice, that is less certain. Then perhaps, Tavik suggested, we need a more compelling case. His red eyes settled on the humans. Witnesses from an affected world. An unexpected silence fell across the room as the implication sank in. You mean, one of us should go with you? Damon asked incredulously. A diplomat, Tavik clarified. To speak for Earth in this matter. Marcus stepped forward before he could second-guess himself. I'll go. Marcus, no, Eleanor protested. You can't just. I built the exoskeleton, he said firmly. I understand enough of their technology now to be useful. And. He looked at Vexra, I think I need to see this through. Vexra moved closer to him, the soft whir of her mechanical legs barely audible. The journey would be one way, she said quietly. Our worlds exist in different stellar sectors. The energy required for transport is significant. I understand, Marcus replied. They held each other's gaze, human and alien, connected by something that transcended their biological differences. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Eleanor broke the silence. You'll need medical support. Their physiology is different, who knows what challenges you'll face. She straightened her shoulders. I'm coming too. Someone has to stay and explain, Damon pointed out pragmatically. Those government agents will want answers. I'll handle them, tell them enough of the truth to satisfy them without revealing everything. Outside, the SUVs were getting closer. Time was running short. It is decided then, Krell announced, standing. We return to the Concorde with the evidence and 2 human representatives. He touched his armor, activating a communication sequence. Extraction in 3 minutes. As Damon gathered supplies for Eleanor and Marcus, Vexra moved to a quiet corner of the garage. Marcus followed her. You're sure about this? She asked, her melodic voice softened so only he could hear. No, he admitted with a half-smile. But I'm doing it anyway. Vexra's silver-blue hand reached for his, 6 fingers intertwining with 5. On my world, there is a concept called Kavari, souls who find each other across impossible distances. Her mercury eyes studied him with an intensity that made his breath catch. I did not believe in it until now. Marcus leaned closer, hesitant but drawn by something he couldn't name. Vexra closed the distance between them, her forehead touching his in a gesture that felt deeply intimate despite its alienness. Your world is beautiful, she whispered. But perhaps mine has things worth seeing too. A soft vibration pulsed through the air as a shimmering light appeared in the center of the garage. The extraction portal had opened, a swirling vortex of energy connecting Earth to somewhere unimaginably distant. Time to go, Krell announced. Damon embraced his friends quickly. I'll tell your sister you took that overseas job you always talked about, he told Marcus. And Eleanor, I'll make sure your patients are transferred to Dr. Michaels. Take care of yourself, Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. And thank you. The government vehicle screeched to a halt outside. Men in suits approached the garage with weapons drawn. Now or never, Tavik urged. Marcus took one last look around the garage, his home for so many years, the place where he'd found his greatest purpose in the most unexpected way. Then he turned to Vexra and nodded. Together, they stepped toward the portal. The exoskeleton hummed perfectly as Vexra walked beside him, her movements fluid and confident. No longer broken. No longer alone. As they reached the threshold, Marcus felt Vexra's hand find his again. Before them lay an unknown future among the stars. Behind them, a world they had each, in their own way, outgrown. Ready? She asked. Ready, he confirmed. The portal enveloped them in light. As government agents burst through the door, they caught only a glimpse of the impossible, humans and aliens vanishing together into a brilliant flash that left nothing behind but an empty garage, a bewildered engineer, and the faint scent of ozone. In the vast darkness between stars, new possibilities waited, for justice, for connection, and for beginnings that not even the most experienced diplomat could have foreseen. As Vexra had learned, sometimes the greatest discoveries came from the most unexpected crashes. And sometimes, being broken was just the first step toward becoming something new.